Info with Integrity Network, powered by Streamlabs Talk Studio.
What choice do I have here? I just have to cooperate, and then figure we'll cooperate, we'll get out of here, and it'll be fine. Well, little did I know, Dave was trying to set me up. I wasn't happy because there's all these veiled threats that are happening during this investigation. Disclosure, full expose saying there's no W5. Maybe we'll do it on Elections Alberta. Our story begins in January 2020. On January 6th, 2020, a letter was put into effect giving Dave Jennings, investigator for Elections Alberta, authorization to pursue conducting investigations into potential violations. So I believe that I was victim of a targeted investigation by Elections Alberta, which has destroyed my reputation, my business, my finances, from which I still have not been able to recover. Unfortunately, because of that tarnished reputation and the unprecedented circumstances of these alleged actions, my claims of being targeted have been brushed off. I have a full audio file of the interview where the investigator, Dave Jennings, a former Calgary police officer, plays good cop, bad cop. However, I lacked other evidence. While planning and collecting information needed for the episode, I came across the following that I believe is direct evidence of that targeted investigation. So they're saying the letter right here that was presented in the case was given on January 6, 2020. It was just under a week after I had sent a letter to then Lieutenant Governor Lois Mitchell and calling on them to investigate the UCP government and the firing of then Elections Commissioner Lauren Gibson. So within days of sending that letter and posting once on social media, which had 2 likes, there was authorization providing Dave Jennings authority to investigate on behalf of Elections Alberta. So all seems well and good. The interesting part is on all communications that I was involved in, including the interview I have the audio from, this investigation was started September of 2021 based on an allegation, which was an email complaint. However, in the interview, investigator Jennings admitted it was actually an Elections Alberta IT department member who flagged a social media post that we had made with an alleged donation to the NDP party.
He's actually works in our IT department, the gentleman that brought this to our attention, which is kind of unusual. That's the first that I've seen.
So there is and as you can see, the engagements per se is the impressions were 269, meaning that ad was shown 269 times. It was clicked 3 times, liked once. So something that was only shown 269 times had enough virality to be picked up by a member of the IT department from Elections Alberta. Jennings also admitted during our initial interview that was then Chief Electoral Officer and Elections Commissioner Glenn Ressler himself who called for the investigation of me.
So my job is quite simply is to just gather as many of the facts as I can relating to a particular complaint. Then I typically, not typically, always compile what we call an investigation report at the end of that for the Chief Electoral Officer / Election Commissioner. He holds both roles, a fellow named Glenn Ressler, for him to review, and then he makes the decisions on any sort of outcome.
The Jason Kenney UCP government's decision under the guise of cost cutting shows Ressler holding both the CEO and EC positions. The Elections Alberta website claims and has always claimed to provide effective nonpartisan services. Unfortunately, in my experience, the services were not nonpartisan. They are nonpartisan now, but effective, not necessarily, as I believe that currently they are understaffed. But here's the current organizational chart showing the current breakdown in where the investigators are in connection to the chief electoral officer. And here's the previous one created when Ressler took over. You see, when Ressler held both positions, the Elections Act was deferred back to the Public Services Act, meaning the accountability is strictly up to the Public Service Commission, who was Tim Grant, a personal appointee by then Premier Jason Kenney. Grant also reported directly to Alberta Treasury Board President and then Minister of Finance, Travis Toews. So we see that Ressler is reporting to an appointee by Jason Kenney, according to the Elections Act and then the Public Services Act. And then that person's reporting to Travis Toews, then Finance Minister. I don't see how that's nonpartisan. So continuing on, while we're under investigation, starting on September 18th, after our conversations with Jennings and providing all the financial documents and all those sort of things, it wasn't until November 19th that we received a letter from CEO Glenn Ressler providing the decision on the case. In that time, from September to November, we were unable to make any social media posts or sell any of our then popular anti-UCP, anti-Jason Kenney merchandise. While others were selling thousands upon thousands of an F.U. Kenney mug, we, as being under investigation by Elections Alberta, were unable to promote or sell any items. On top of that, because we were forthright in the information of being under investigation with Elections Alberta to our partners then left our partnership. And our partnerships with those individuals was dissolved, and we were left on our own trying to fight uphill with no momentum. Well, on November 19th, we got the letter from Glenn Ressler, and a lot of interesting information was divulged in that letter. So, writing to inform you about the outcome of the complaint to the Elections Commissioner, which was received on June 30th, 2020. Okay. Our office received an email complaint that Balaguer may have been selling shirts and donating proceeds to the New Democratic Party. During the compliant analysis stage, my investigator discovered that you, through several entities, appeared to be printing and selling merchandise that had messaging which opposed the current provincial government, the Premier, and members of the Legislative Assembly. On September 1st, 2021, I approved an investigation into the matter, and the investigation included an examination of your activities, and as follows. The investigation included multiple interviews, gathering of direct evidence. I understand fully cooperative during the investigation and participated in an interview. My office has now completed an extensive analysis of the allegation and the facts, including a detailed examination of the Election Finances and Contributions Disclosure Act, and extensive consultation with legal counsel and other subject matter experts within Elections Alberta. So for a guy who was claimed to be donating partial proceeds to the NDP from t-shirt sales, and then when we proved through our financial records that we did not donate any money and we didn't make any sales, they still had to use all the resources and extensive consultation with legal counsel to come up with the fact that we had no evidence that we demonstrated that myself or entities that were under our company, Game Changers Canada, contributed any funds to the NDP. It says you admitted that you offered to sell the items and donate some proceeds, but the NDP did not accept your proposal. Furthermore, based on my examination and interpretation of the legislation, selling merchandise with political messaging does not necessarily constitute political advertising. That is actually changed. And if you are planning on spending up to $1,000, even if you haven't spent the $1,000 limit, you must be registered as a political third-party advertiser. So as per all these things, Glenn Ressler will not be taking any further action on our case. So, good news, right? Well, we'd already become a registered political third-party advertiser with Elections Alberta on November 10th. So, 9 days prior to getting the letter from Glenn Ressler. We were under Anger Dad Canada. We've currently re-registered as the Alberta Accountability Alliance and have registered as a electoral third-party advertiser because on January 24th, 2022, we were informed that we were prohibited from advertising during the by-election as we were not registered as an electoral third-party advertiser. We weren't explained about the difference between electoral and political when we first registered with Elections Alberta. Mistake from our side, not forthright with information from their side, whatever the case may be. But we did correct that by the time that the by-election was complete. So on March 18th, 2022, we received the email stating Bill 81, Election Statutes Amendment Act, had been proclaimed and would take an effect on March 31st, 2022. And a number of things are in there, including a lot of finance changes and those aspects. A lot of American language has been added to the Elections Act and so forth. This bill also made the previous Elections Act obsolete, removing the requirements of having a separate chief electoral officer and elections commissioner to defer to that Public Service Act, effectively removing any sort of alleged direct connection from the UCP government and Elections Alberta, at least publicly. So we sit here and go, publicly, they're not saying anything. We know our experiences that the previous elections commissioner and chief electoral officer was at least skewed against certain parties that were not the current government. You know, they say controversy creates cash. That is true. However, what we've learned in this process is that controversy needs to come from those who are connected or with privilege for it to create the cash or to create public interest. So what does that mean? You know, these days we watch as those from a place of privilege, such as Nate in the Breakdown and Athena Metsalopoulos, their events, their platforms, their messages, their GoFundMes are all supported and platformed as they are considered whistleblowers that need to be saved. However, the same can't be said about myself or others in a similar boat. Well, others sat back and observed and waited for things to come to light. Those others also declined to join me in bringing people together, refused to join and declined to join the Alberta Accountability Alliance, asked me to help them set up their own third-party advertisers, and then they don't want to work with me and refuse collaboration. But those people are not taking direct action. So there's where I sit frustrated. As the sole voice for the Accountability Alliance at this point, we are not getting the same support or platform as those with privilege. I risked it all since 2019, when we called out Bill Haight for the various reasons that we informed you thusly. It wasn't just about the effect it was going to take on the 2S LGBTQ community. It was also the effect of removing the word public in the Education Act, purposefully ensuring that the funds of any school district or any school in the province is now considered a provincial school. So funding just goes into one big pool, which includes private enterprises and religious messaging schools. And the Minister of Education, previously Lagrange, decide who gets the funding from the big pool. They're doing the same thing now. Mr. Lagrange is in healthcare, and they're doing the same thing with that. If you saw that the new corporation for emergency care, it's all a way to privatize our public services and take the public services that we have and decimate them from the inside. So then people choosing to shift to private because they offer a better service. Again, we struggle. I can't qualify for disability, even though I have severe ADHD, oppositional defiance disorder, anxiety, depression, diverticulosis, a high blood pressure, among other physical ailments. And because of my stance like this, I cannot find employment in this province because they don't want to have the whistleblower or someone who is anti-government or anti-capitalist to have a voice or to have a job with them. So myself, my family continue to struggle financially, mentally, emotionally, and physically. We have continually called and plead for assistance and support and have been ignored, with those calls being unanswered for the last half a decade. Not half a year, not a year, but 5 years and counting. I've done everything I can to keep the Alberta Accountability Alliance in good standing and ready to fight the corruption of this government and this system. So again, with everything I have left, my plea to you is, please assist our family and the AB Alliance with a purchase from or abpoly.ca.
The following message has been authorized by Alberta Accountability Alliance abpolyca at gmail.com.
The premier stood together, all there in a line, saying we're fighting for Canada, we stand side by side. But Daniel packed her suitcase, said I'll see y'all later, flew down to Mar-a-Lago to ride Trump's escalator. Oh, Danielle Smith's reasonably labeled a traitor, could have joined in but went to a dictator, while the rest stood strong for the maple leaf. She pawned off the flag like a billionaire thief.